Now that we're all so super excited that Russell T Davies is coming back, allow me to throw a wet blanket on the enthusiasm. Just a little bit. Hey folks, so when I did my video talking about the return of Russell T Davies as the showrunner for Doctor Who, I actually mentioned in it that while I'm excited and very interested to see what he'll do, he wasn't perfect in his original run as showrunner. And I said somewhat offhandedly that I could do a whole video on the issues I have with his tenure. And enough people expressed an interest in me doing that yeah, here we are. Before I get into this, there's a couple things I want to be really clear about. One, despite the joke I made in the intro, I'm actually not trying to dampen anybody's enthusiasm. I'm not trying to tear down Russell T Davies. I've actually done another video where I talked with Crispy Pro arguing that RTD was better than Moffat as a showrunner, so check that out if you doubt me on that. And in addition to that, I actually don't have any sufficient reason to believe that the issues I'm about to outline are going to repeat when he takes over again. I mentioned in that video previously that he has changed enough as an artist that I don't think he's going to approach it in the exact same way with the exact same mindset that he did before. So the one other thing that I'll mention is some of the things I'm going to talk about are not unique to him. Actually, a fair number of them were continued through Moffat's era. So don't bother pointing that out. I'm well aware this is not about how Moffat is better. This is just looking at RTD's run in a bubble by itself and talking about some of the problems that I had with it. Okay? Okay. All right. Well, I suppose we should start with kind of the elephant in the room, which would be the camp. Now, it should be pointed out, Doctor Who has always been relatively campy to some degree, often just by virtue of its production budget back in the classic era. The thing is, RTD did kind of lean into that a bit more intentionally in a way that, for me personally, I didn't love. However, I'm putting this one at the front because I actually don't want to dwell on it that much. While there was more campy elements to his tenure than in, say, Moffat or honestly even Chibnall, I do feel that he tapered off of those. The first series is the one that has the most blatant camp elements, and I felt like it actually got better balanced during his time. They were pretty heavy in that first series though, which is actually why when I did a video a couple years ago talking about where to start newcomers to the show, I actually don't recommend starting with Rose and with Series 1 because I feel it's not particularly representative of a lot of what the show became since, even under RTD's own tenure. So while I don't love a lot of the camp elements in this, I am prepared to move on from that because it seemed like even RTD realized, maybe we don't need as much as we started out with. But I think it probably would have been brought up in the comments if I didn't mention it, so let's move on. Next up, I want to talk about the mystery box format, which, again, is not unique to his era. Actually, most series of Doctor Who have this to varying degrees. How intrusive I feel it is goes up and down from series to series, but every single one of RTD's series had it. Now, when I say mystery box, I need to be really clear about this because people misconstrue this a lot. They seem to think that I have a problem with there being a series overall story or an arc or some sort of thing cooking in the background of Doctor Who at all, and that I want it purely episodic. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there are other ways to do it besides what RTD did every single series, which is to take one thing and just keep dropping and sprinkling it across the show and not have it pay off until the finale. In Series 1, it was Bad Wolf. In Series 2, it was Torchwood.
What about Torchwood? I know I'm not supposed to know about it, I realize that. Not even the United Nations knows.
Series 3, it was Mr. Saxon.
Orders to Mr. Saxon. Fire at will.
And then in Series 4, it was the planets vanishing.
What do you mean lost? How'd you lose a planet?
I would say Series 4 is the least intrusive of those. The other ones feel incredibly crowbarred in and just shoved in there to remind you, hey, this is the thing, we'll explain it eventually. The reason I don't like the mystery box format is that it's not actually stringing you along with a story that you're like, ooh, where's that going? It's literally just dropping something that has little to no meaning until they explain it. That doesn't really engage me. It annoys me because I'm just like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know you'll get back to that, but right now it means nothing. So up until they get to the final part where they explain what that is all about or show where it was going, I don't care. Like I said, the planets disappearing was the least intrusive because when it came up, it actually mattered to the plot, as opposed to all the vote stacks and stuff or all the bad wolf stuff, which only mattered in retrospect by the time we got to the end. Now, again, I'm not saying that you can't make a mystery box format work. What bothered me about this was the fact that he did it every single time. And arguably did it with the specials as well, because he introduced the 4 knocks thing in the second of those.
He will knock 4 times.
It's just a format that I feel has been way overused, and as I said, continued after RTD left. So I'm well sick of that. But even at the time that he moved on and Moffat took over, I was already done with it. I don't think it's a particularly clever or engaging way to string along an overarching story for the series. And the fact that he did it every time, that bugs me. The next couple are going to circle around the companions. The first one is a bit superficial. The latter one, not so much. The latter one actually frustrates me a bit more. But superficially, I really don't like that he contrived reasons for the Doctor to kiss the companions every single series with every companion. Because, you know, with Eccleston, he had to kiss Rose to take the energy from the TARDIS from her, which, like, I understand that they rationalized it as being something other than a romantic kiss, but it still felt weird because while she definitely had a romantic thing going with Tennant, I never got that vibe from her and Eccleston, personally. So that was weird. Then when we introduce Martha, we have the whole kissing to make her read as not human briefly, and so we contrive it there. And then with Donna, it's played for the biggest comedy thing where she kisses him as a shock thing, and like, I get that you're lampshading it, but you're still just doing it. And overall, the romanticizing of the Doctor in general and the relationship with the companion in specific, that frustrates me. And when I say romanticizing, I don't necessarily mean in terms of having an unrequited or a requited love interest, because obviously that doesn't apply to Donna, but she still gets this romanticized thought of what their relationship is, insofar as the way she envisions them being together and traveling forever. Platonically, yes, but that is still a romanticized idea of what their future will be together, even if it doesn't involve the standard definition of romance. And this entire dynamic with the companions is something that was interesting when first introduced because it was new. This hadn't really gone on in the classic series, arguably maybe a little with Romana, but that was actually largely just spillover chemistry between two performers who were dating for a while. So this was new elements, but the fact that it kind of became the default for the companions, and yes, again, continued on even after RTD left, but again, it's the fact that he did it to some degree every single time, but that factors into my bigger issue with how he handled the companions. He decided that nobody would ever leave the TARDIS under anything other than traumatic or broken circumstances. The only way Rose was ever going to leave was if she was separated by a dimensional wall. The only way that Donna was ever going to leave is if it was literally going to kill her to stay. And even then, she didn't want to go. The Doctor had to force her to. Now, Martha did leave on her own, but it's still treated as a traumatic thing. It's not her going, this has been fun, we've had a good time, but I'm ready to stop now. It's treated as a breakup. It's treated as her saying, look, this is bad for me. And so it's still treated as something more traumatic than companions would just leave in the old series. They would just leave. And like, again, granted, the first time you explore it this way is interesting because only a handful of the departures for companions were in any way traumatic for anybody back in the classic series. So it wasn't something that was explored all that much. But again, I feel like it was at the time a bit of self-projection on RTD's part. He seemed to come at it from an angle of, well, if I was with the Doctor, I would never want to stop traveling. So all the characters that he made also have that same thought process. Oh, I never want this to stop. Well, if they never want it to stop, the only way we can make it stop is by doing something traumatic to them, whether it be separating them with dimension walls, whether it be wiping their memory, or whether it be traumatizing them with a year of wandering the planet while their family's tortured. So the fact that we can't just have an amenable, it's been good, Doctor, thank you, departure under his tenure, that combined with the romanticization of the relationship between the companion and the Doctor, again, as a one-off, I could get it, but as an overall trend, don't like it. And I mean, that's kind of the thing overall with the things that I'm bringing up. They have worked at some point, usually the first time that he did them, but then he just kept doing them. And that was one of the reasons that I was actually really okay with the time that he left, because I felt like he hadn't been able to break out of certain patterns in the way he was approaching the story at the time back then. Again, to reiterate, that doesn't mean I think he's going to do those patterns again. We'll see. And also tied to the companions is a spotlight being thrown on the domestic life of the companion. Now, again, when the series started, this was uncharted territory. Because prior to this point, companions basically got on board the TARDIS, traveled for a while, and then eventually left. We didn't really address where they came from, what they left behind, what their relationship with people back home was. So it was fertile territory to do something new with Rose and have a boyfriend back home, to have her mother who cares about her back home, and to try and juggle all of that while traveling with the Doctor. It was new at the time, but that newness doesn't stick. And while this same pattern of highlighting the domestic life of the companion would eventually get us Wilf, and Wilf is amazing and perfect and awesome, there isn't all that much brought to the table by Donna's mother. And can you tell me anything actually contributed to the overall plot by Martha's family? I know they get a chunk of screen time, especially on the back end, but does it add anything that isn't already there? Because I don't think it does. It started to become an obligation, like, well, we addressed once that the companion's home life is somehow affected, so now we have to address it every time, but you don't. There's also a practical fallout from that, which is that if you establish and start dealing with the fact that these characters have a home life back on Earth, that means the story has to keep coming back to modern day Earth, which is another thing that just annoys me about the modern era in general. Now, again, not strictly speaking unique to Davies, and I'm not even sure he was the biggest offender of this, but it did give a reason for the character and the show to just be rooted in modern day Earth as a default, and all the space travel was, it was treated as that, as a trip. The home isn't the TARDIS, the home is, with your family back home, and the TARDIS is just your means of traveling. Again, to pull on the classic series, the TARDIS was home during the time that these people traveled. And it meant that the show actually, after we got past the third Doctor, did not come back to Earth all that often. Because why would you? You could go anywhere in time and space. Why would you keep coming back to Earth? Now, I don't doubt that part of the reason to have more stories set in modern day Earth was a budget control issue, because you can just do location shooting as opposed to having to build sets or try and CGI alien worlds or whatever. So, I get it. I understand there were probably logistical considerations to this decision, but it still makes the Doctor and the Doctor's travels less otherworldly because we have to keep coming back. Because we brought up the domestic life of the companions. So if you're going to bring it up, you got to do something with it. So you just keep coming back. And minor tangent, how much you want to bet if we ever get the thing that I want, which is to get a companion not from modern day, from either the future or the past or an alien world or something, how much you want to bet that we won't keep going back to where they come from all the dang time? Modern day Earth is I'm not going to say yields no good stories. There are some very good stories set on modern day Earth in Doctor Who in the modern era, but it is by default kind of the most boring place to set a story. And you have to do a bunch of other stuff to make it interesting, which sometimes the show does, but you're starting at a disadvantage doing that. And lastly, this one is probably more subjective than any of these. And like, again, if you enjoy any of the aspects that I liked and missed them when he was gone, or liked that they were continued when he was gone, that's fine. This is ultimately my opinion. And this last one is the most sort of my opinion than the others, and probably the one I'm most likely to get called out on, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. He was kind of self-indulgent. And again, that's not to say that other creators weren't. Moffat could get very self-indulgent. But the way that they would do it is kind of reflective of their approach, where Moffat would get self-indulgent by basically disappearing up his own big brain and trying to be super ultra clever. RTD would get self-indulgent in a bit of a more traditional way. And I think you can look to the finales for that. In hindsight, Series 1 probably has the most restrained finale, and that ends with the companion having the power of a god, bringing back Jack Harkness, and apparently at the time wiping out all Daleks, including the Dalek Emperor, and then the Doctor dying. Like, that's big, and that's the most restrained that it gets. We get to Series 2, and we have the very, honestly, fanficky idea of Daleks and Cybermen just going at it. And again, like, none of these are bad ideas, but I'm going over the pattern with you. Then we get to Series 3. We bring back the Master. And we have this whole, we literally turn the Doctor into Jesus. I mean, not literally, but practically.
I forgive you.
He is reborn through the power of belief in him. It's really kind of self-indulgent in terms of the character. And then Series 4, and then ultimately the End of Time Part 2 gets really self-indulgent on the show as a whole in terms of, well, we got to bring everybody in that we possibly can. And we got to have the Doctor go on this massive goodbye tour, stopping in on every companion that we can get to come in for a day of shooting. And again, I get it. It's kind of the Return of the King thing where this has been going on so long. If we're ending this story, or in the case of Doctor Who, ending the showrunner and this Doctor's eras, then yeah, we kind of earned the right to have these extra things. But again, the indulgence escalated during his time, at times, honestly, to the detriment of the story. While there is a superficial thrill at things like Daleks versus Cybermen and so many past characters coming back in Journey's End, and then having the Doctor stop by and say goodbye to all these people, there is a little bit of a thrill to that. As strictly as a narrative function, it drags, it bloats. And that, as I said, kind of got worse as time went on. Now, that's all I really have in terms of broad things, because what I didn't want this to do was to pick out specific episodes that he wrote and just go through a whole list of nitpicks. Because, you know what? You can watch my overdue Doctor Who reviews. I'll try and put a playlist up there if you want to see me take those on one episode at a time and bring up whatever my issues are. That's not what I wanted here. I wanted to talk about the broad strokes and the repeated things that he did across his era that I didn't love. Does it mean I don't like RTD? No, it doesn't. Doesn't mean I'm not excited for him to come back? No, it absolutely does not. But I said I had issues. Enough of you asked. There you go. So, what do you think about my assessment here? Even if you think I'm very wrong, please be polite about it. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, and subscribe. All the usual stuff. I got a Patreon. That is how I pay the bills and am able to talk to you folks on a regular basis. So maybe consider supporting me there. There's also YouTube memberships if you want to go that way, but don't worry too much about it. Because at the end of the day, you are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. This video wouldn't have been possible without the support of my patrons, and I want to give special thanks to Jared Boyce, MJ, The Doctor, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Kaylin Schwartz, Edelon, Robin Moore, Ross Schultz, and Shayla Gorley. Thanks so much.